It is Health Diary. Thank you for joining us. My name is Gladys Gashanja and we're coming to you from the Westwood Hotel here in Nairobi. Now, a survey done by the Movement for Global Health indicated that there is a high population of Kenyans living with attention deficit hyperactive disorder. Now, ADHD is a very common mental illness among children, but if arrested early, these children can be assisted to live a long, fulfilling life. Now, the realities of ADHD coming right after this fact of the matter. Attention deficit hyperactive disorder is a chronic illness in which a person has differences in brain development and brain activity, which affects attention, the ability to sit still, and self-control. ADHD is usually diagnosed in school-aged children, but some of those living with ADHD continue to experience symptoms as adults. ADHD occurs more often in males than in females, and behaviors can be different in boys and girls. Studies have indicated that many people with ADHD have higher than average IQs. The best treatment and management of ADHD occurs when a team approach is used with teachers, parents, therapists, and physicians working together.
My name is Becky Mwehaki. I'm a mom to a 4-year-old boy who has ADHD. He grew up normally, like just any other child, but we noticed his speech was there, but it went away. He was going to 2 years. That's where now they confirmed he's on the spectrum, but he's affected very mildly. There are those who you cannot even communicate with, but for him communication is very good because he understands everything. The tantrums, they are overwhelming, toileting, and now the feeding program. He loves music, so even when he's all over the tantrums and you just put on a Drake song or a Cardi B, he'll just switch and be so calm and sit down and just start dancing. Or maybe the phone, you give him the phone, he knows how to operate. No wheat, no red meat, no sugar, bananas, ripe bananas, no apples, no milk. He becomes very hyper. There's a special flour for those with ADHD and it's very expensive. Like a packet of 2 kgs goes for $16.50. I found a school, it's called Autism International School. It's in Thika. The school fees and the therapy sessions. In a month, you'll need like 100 Gs. Wow. Especially for an unemployed person, it becomes, I don't know even what to say. It's hard. There's a time I tried having the NHIF when he was for therapy, but they did not accept it. They said unless maybe he has another, like maybe he was suffering from a stomachache or something, another bill that is not the spectrum thing, the therapy. You know, you find parents hiding their kids in their house. They don't want the kid to leave the house because, oh, my kid cannot speak, my kid cannot stand up or walk like the rest. No, just embrace it. Be proud of it. And when you do that, it boils down to the kid. The kid pia ana feel that positive energy, you see.
So let's get to learn more about attention deficit hyperactive disorder. ADHD is how it is abbreviated. To help us do so, Purity Mwaka, living with ADHD, and of course we have Zawadi Kimari, who is a clinical psychologist. Ladies, thank you for joining me. Now I'll start with you, Zawadi. They say ADHD has something to do with the differences in the brain development and brain activity. What exactly causes the differences in the first place?
Basically, ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition, and When someone is born, your brain is not fully developed. It develops as you continue to grow and evolve and are in touch with so many other aspects. So when it comes to ADHD, some parts of the brain develop a little bit slower than those of people who don't have ADHD. And then also there's the aspect whereby particular parts of the brain region do not receive as much stimulation of neurotransmitters. And because they don't, then the brain activity is a little bit different. If you had to take a brain scan, a CT scan of someone, you wouldn't see the difference per se, but the way information is processed is a little bit different.
So, is there anything during the pregnancy that could have an effect and probably predispose the child to ADHD?
Yes. Our brains, on a technicality, start to develop while we're still in our mother's womb. And therefore, any exposure to pollutants, lead, mercury, things like that, if your mom smokes or takes alcohol during the pregnancy, especially during the first trimester and a little bit towards the end of the second to the third trimester, then that may have a bit of implication. It doesn't just stop with the mom. So even if the dad smokes or drinks, childhood trauma, then parts of your brain can be affected by all of that, you know, the emotional aspects of it, the intensity of it. Falls amongst children may cause that as well. But then there's also genetic predisposition, which means if I have ADHD, there's a high chance I could pass it on to my baby.
And you talk about the predisposing factors, and I'd like to hear from Purity. Is this something that is in your family?
No, I don't think so.
Any family member with any mental illness that you know of?
No.
Not at all.
No.
Okay, so there are chances it can be very random.
Yes.
How long did it take to be diagnosed? Let's start from that.
I was diagnosed in December 2017. Can't remember how old I was. 22. Yeah, I was 22.
Okay.
I was just experiencing a hard time in my life. So I decided to seek help for it. So when I did, the first thing after the diagnosis, I was told I have ADHD. I was relieved, maybe. Yeah, because there's that thing where you feel very different from people. You do things differently. You process information differently. You react to things differently. Especially my sensitivity used to make me feel so out of place, because when someone does something that is hurtful to someone else or just is mean to someone else, it might make me cry, and I'm not even the person in question. And then everyone around me is gonna be like, "You're so soft. What's up with that?" And
what makes it different from your regular child and this child has ADHD?
When we're looking at, say, a child who has ADHD, this child will make silly mistakes when you're sending them, say, in the shop for milk, salt, and bread. They will come with milk, sugar, and bread. And that happens not only at home, in school as well. So very long mathematical concepts. If this child is not very interested in math, they could easily forget they had a remainder one, or they borrowed one in a long division. And it's very consistent, the pattern as well, when they go to church. John 3:16, for God so they will hear John 16, the 3 is gone. Not because this child is being unruly or they're being disrespectful. It's just that something may have captured their attention as you are speaking. With a child who doesn't have ADHD, they'll do that once, twice, you'll reprimand them, and that will be it. Okay. But for a child who has ADHD, you can't help it.
I strongly feel like ADHD is it's more challenging for the female child than the male, because people expect you to be calm and collected as a lady. They expect you to, sit with your legs crossed, but you want to sit with your legs up in the air doing something. Those are things that I have never been able to have control over.
I don't think I had a problem with the learning. I just got bored really fast because the moment a concept is explained and I get it, and there are other people who don't, and the teacher has to keep explaining it to them, I zone out. It's so easy to get me angry. It's so easy to make me excited about something very, very, very small. It's so easy to make me sad. It's just very easy for me to move from this one thing to this other thing to this other thing in a span of an hour or something.
Now, just listening to her and some of the descriptions he gave earlier clearly shows there are different types of ADHDs. What are these subtypes?
So the first one is inattentive type ADHD, and that's the one that's most commonly unrecognized, which is what she describes. This is a person who would be very contained, very quiet, very withdrawn, but then internally they're very restless. They feel very impatient, but you don't do anything about it. Then there's the hyperactive or impulsive type. So that's the one that's commonly known. So this is a person who I wouldn't wait for you to ask me the question. I'd start answering the question. You know, I wouldn't wait for my turn to speak in this conversation because I have things to say. So I'd start saying whatever it is that I need to say. And if I don't say it, it's gone. You know, you fidget a little bit more with your hands, with your feet. Higher chances of being very impulsive, taking up risky behaviors, you know, like going on a random trip that you didn't plan for. In a child, this is a child who would be, you know, all over the place. So touching this, touching that. Oh my, that looks nice. So a lot of activity happening, and he's just a ball of energy. And then we have a combined type. Now, for a combined type, you have around 6 symptoms and a few other symptoms from both spheres.
And after the diagnosis, which one were you found to have? Purity.
I'm a mixture of everything.
So you have the combined.
Yeah, I'm a cocktail.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Now, Dr. when we come back from the break, I really would like to understand this condition affects children and mostly is seen when they go to school. So the question is it a learning disability or is it a mental illness? That answer right after this break. Our conversation today, ADHD, still with Purity and Zawadi, even as we learn more about this mental illness. And it's interesting because most people would say, mtoto wangu ako sawa. They're just being a child. Is there a certain age where you can clearly say this child has ADHD?
Recent research shows that by the time a child is around 6-7 years, you can already start to tell the signs because by then they go to school. And then when they go to school, they are not able to come back with all their pencils. They come with their sock and Wanjiku's sock. They are not able to do their homework. It takes quite a lot to get them to settle in after school. The CDC stretches it out into if someone has very severe forms of ADHD, by 2 years, you can actually see the signs. For a clinician to give a complete diagnosis of ADHD, you have to be around 12 years. Prior to that, we can just, you know, be labeling someone who is just being a typical normal kid, you know.
How young do you think you were to tell you were different from the other kids?
As far as I can remember, maybe 6. At that point, I was taking exams for class 3 because of the boredom in my class, and there was the whole discussion about whether I should skip a class. But then there's this part about you being really smart, but there's this part about you getting in trouble all the time because you won't be quiet in class or you lost something. But I just thought that was normal.
Yeah,
I think,
as a child. What she's explaining would easily misdirect any health practitioner and even a parent.
Many of the people that I interact with will first find out that they have ADHD when they're in their teen years, almost about to join uni, during uni, or sometimes you find out when your child is being diagnosed with ADHD. And by then you've lived this whole life struggling through something that would have easily been managed, but so majority of the people that I see gets their diagnosis way into adulthood.
So is this a learning disability? Clearly she did not have the learning disability, or is it a mental illness?
ADHD is not a learning disability at all. It's not. Our educational system are all pegged on memory. It's pegged on how well you're able to, remember concepts, how well you're able to remember who was the first president of Kenya and all of that. And sometimes it could be that the person feels it's boring. In their perspective, a bit pointless. Like there's no, what's the point? If I don't understand what the point is, then
it's not worth learning.
Yeah. However, if the child is given a different structure altogether, then you see a total difference between their earlier performance and the performance that they have right now.
Did the teachers, adults around you, even kids, notice that there was something wrong with you, or call it wrong with you, or different from them?
I'd get so bored in the middle of a lesson. I'd feel the need to just get out and go stroll outside. So when I tell you excuse yourself in a class and say you're going to the washroom or something, so when I get out, I'm definitely not going to go to the washroom. But then the teacher is going to spot me somewhere walking around, and they're going to be so concerned. You said you wanted to go to the washroom, and now I'm seeing you strolling somewhere
Which looks
outside.
like indiscipline.
Yes. So I'd get punished so much for it.
So there are some coexistence between ADHD and other neurological disorders like autism.
Autism is one, anxiety disorders, depression. There's also a bit of OCD that develops amongst people who have ADHD. Some people can develop bipolar disorder. Sometimes you may think that someone has something else on top, whereas we're just looking at ADHD.
You talked about your diagnosis coming at a difficult time of your life. Do you think that difficulty was brought about by the ADHD?
Yeah, because especially the impulsivity, I can wake up today and decide that I'm gonna come live back there. I
move in.
Yeah, I like how that place looks like, so I'm gonna move in there. I'm going to fixate on it so much that I won't be able to think about anything else until I get that done. I was in situations where things would cause so much stress and so much pain to me. I got to a point that I felt so out of place. I started getting suicidal feelings, and it was so bad. It was one of the lowest points of my life.
Has this costed you relationships, jobs?
Yes, very much so, because I self-sabotage a lot, because I keep thinking, okay, I don't know how far this will go, but it might get to a point where I might do something and it's gonna get messed up. So before it gets there, let me mess it up mapema then. With jobs, I can't really work at a place that doesn't have proper structure. I don't take abstract instructions very well. So you might also think that I'm being problematic, but you're not being clear on what it is that you want. So I fit in very well in agencies, marketing agencies. There's high speed, but there's structure too. Again, with friendships, I also need people who won't be around telling me, you're such a sensitive person, you're such a this and that. So I began to really isolate. I only hang out with people when it's necessary for me to do so.
A lot of that points to the treatment and management of ADHD. What does that look like? She talked about medicine, which is already on. What else?
Exercise does a really, really good job because of that bilateral stimulation of the brain. And then also when you're an adult, we don't get PE so much. So at least it helps burn the energy, the excess energy. Massages work well as well, just to help you calm down. Meditation and mindfulness does a really, really good thing for people who have ADHD. Yoga does well for them as well. Healthy diets, first and foremost. And then on top of the healthy diets, then you do lots of omega-3 fish, do lots of nuts, avocados, things rich in magnesium, things rich in potassium. Support groups do really well for people who have ADHD, because then it creates a community, a tribe, or a family of sorts, whereby at least you can sit around people who get what it is you're going through. Therapy, especially CBT, is really good for ADHD, because now you're able to have a healthy conversation with yourself. Having friends, family who understand and who can help you, especially when you're having what we call an ADHD funk. So an ADHD funk is when you're not really depressed, but you do feel and you actually exhibit symptoms that would look like depression.
The cost of treatment.
The medication is so expensive because it costs, the meds I take cost about 530 shillings for a tablet. So I need insurance to be able to get that. Whenever I don't have insurance, I get them with cash, but it can be quite tricky.
For people who are civil servants, like teachers, civil servants, NHIF will help much, but not so much in the outpatient, quite a lot more in the inpatient. For those who are non-civil servants, then NHIF, it's a little bit tricky on that end, but other insurances do help quite a bit. And, they cover both the therapy, the doctor's charges, as well as the medication fees.
Purity, what would you like people to understand about living with this condition and the kind of support you need?
I have a dad who really gets me. I keep thinking to myself, if I didn't have that, then I think I'd have broken a long time ago. I have told an employer once, it didn't go so well for me. Yeah, it ended up so badly, and it was a very lucrative job.
People who have ADHD are really one of the coolest people around.
Hanging out with Purity, I can say that, yeah.
The thing about the world is very restrained and restricted. So restricted that we don't want to think outside the box. But then sometimes there are people who have no boxes, and that's totally fine.
This is the first step in the right direction, creating awareness on ADHD. And we thank you, Purity, so much for coming forth and even telling your story on a broader scale. Right. It is really encouraging and an inspiration to many living with this condition. Thank you. And of course, Zawadi Kimari, who is a clinical psychologist, thank you for your time. We have been learning about ADHD. Time now for the health tip.
Health tip, brought to you by Good Life Pharmacy.
The festive season is here with us again, and as you travel around the country, you need some essential items to have on board. We have motion sickness tablets. You can carry painkillers just in case you get a headache. We have anti-allergy tablets. We have the indigestion tablets just in case you overindulge. It is also very important to have a first aid kit on board. This is an oral kit. It has a toothbrush. It has a dental floss, toothpicks. This is a sunscreen for those people traveling to very sunny areas. This is a lotion to just moisturize you, a deodorant, and this is an insect repellent to protect you against insect bites. You can get all this at any Good Life Pharmacy. We wish you a happy festive season, and we're all about you.
Health tip, brought to you by Good Life Pharmacy.
Thank you for joining us on a Health Diary. My name is Gladys Gashanja, and thank you for those suggestions coming through on our social media handles. We've been coming to you from the Westwood Hotel here in Nairobi and hoping to see you next time. Bye. So let's get to know about Do I start with the full name and then just abbreviate? By the way, the medication does help because she's really contained herself. Really, but are you seeing the way now? A survey done by the global inanipoteleaje, the movement, it comes first. Movement for global health. I want to call it the global movement for health. Movement for global health. Movement for global health.